Oh, thank you again for joining me at Bert's Books today. I'm just going to do a little roundup of the things I acquired this last weekend. I went out on Saturday to that little bit of market that's kind of along the south bank near the Royal Festival Hall. Part of it's under a bridge, and there are still second-hand book stalls there. Which is comforting because sources of these items kind of depleting somewhat. So anyway, I was able to pick up a few action-packed kind of items. The first of which, J.D. Gilman and John Clive, KG 200, Kampfgeschwader 200. I think that might be. I think there was such a thing. I think there was this kind of secret Luftwaffe unit during the Second World War dedicated to shady kind of operations, named KG 200. This, I can't say how close to reality this is. This is a strictly fictionalised treatment of I suppose what this unit the sort of things it might have got up to. It's one of these books, I know a mate had it when I was about 14 or 13, and a mate was reading it, and he opened it up to show me what seemed to us at the time quite a daring sex scene. Naturally I've skimmed through it for that. I've found what might be it. Obviously, these things are always really disappointing and dull when you find them in adult life for some reason. But anyway, that's by the by. I don't think it's packed with titillation like that. It attempts to sort of do I suppose, a serious treatment on a what-if basis of what this squadron might have been up to. Like I say, I'm not clear how historically dependable any of the content is, but good read actually. It's not a bad read. I'm so far anyway. I'm not really familiar. I don't think I know these authors, but it's got one of those. I forget what you call this. Is this a step back cover? I really can't remember. Someone will put me right in the comments maybe. But you get the little peekaboo. See that little peekaboo thing there. So you see that. Oh God, sorry. Caveat: political symbolism. I didn't even think. Yeah. You see the little window, the little peekaboo window, gives you a little shot of it's obviously an airman within his cockpit, but the reveal when you open it up, because you're looking at this kind of very of the period German stuff, but when you open it up, it's a B-17. It's an American flying fortress. So something's kind of not quite sitting right there. Evidently, it's quite a good little teaser device for what you're going to get when you read it. Anyway, sticking with that war theme, there was a bit of a haul of old 70s, 80s war pulps on offer that day. Another of which I picked up, K.N. Kostov, Cossack Attack. Who was K.N. Kostov? Now, if you've ever, I still haven't opened this one. It's still it's packaging. But I've read another of those titles. You'll find if you open up a K.N. Kostov, well, I think it's meant to be like a Soviet punishment battalion, a disciplinary battalion. But you'll find when you read it, it's just weirdly, if you're familiar with this war bore kind of genre, they're weirdly familiar. Just uncannily familiar when you read them. The reason for that being, spoiler alert, that K.N. Kostov, it's a moonlighting Leo Kessler, otherwise known as Charles Whiting, and it's pretty much a cut and paste treatment on what you may already know of him from his Votan series of books. I covered the first of those a couple of years ago. Not terribly sophisticated stuff, and this These seem to be just a bit of a cut and paste job. They just transfer the setting to a Russian setting, and the names are Russian names and blah blah, but it's just the same kind of crap. Really, but I'm a sucker for these stuff. Look at that cover, Cossack Attack. Anyway, we'll see if I get around to it. I couldn't really, if it was only a £5 or something, I couldn't really turn it down, I suppose. Another, again on that war theme, not a Second World War themed title this time. This, the classic true life account of Mercenary Warfare by Mike Hoare. I believe he was often known as Mad Mike Hoare, technical advisor for the film The Wild Geese. Somewhere I do have the actual novel of The Wild Geese. Obviously the film is just one of those Boxing Day favourites for men of my age, but I don't think I've ever read this before, so I suppose I have an idea what I'm going to expect from this. There was this big kind of hang-up on this mercenary type thing in the 70s. There was a bit of a fascination. Don't know if people kind of rather romanticised whatever this represented. I do remember as a kid, sometimes you'd go into newsagents and there'd be this magazine on the shelves. And the magazine was called Soldier of Fortune, and it was aimed... I don't know if it was aimed at actual mercenaries or just kind of... were there that many to merit a magazine? I don't know, but I suppose more likely kind of voyeuristic wannabe mercenaries, maybe. Yeah, I've never read a copy. It's not my bag, obviously, but probably will end up reading this. The cover art. I mean, how can you turn that down? That's like classic war pulp, guns blazing stuff. So we'll see. I mean, it might be quite grim. Actually, I don't believe that was it probably wasn't particularly picturesque, a lot of that. So we'll see. Best for last. Oh joy! Reconnecting with my childhood in a major way here. The Action Annual 1977. I don't think I've really touched on comic books too much in this, but action comic for British men of a certain age. Action comic was the kind of this classic forbidden fruit of 70s culture. It was the paper that it ran stories your parents wouldn't approve of. In my case, my parents didn't really show an interest in what comics I was reading, so I was all right. But pressure was brought to bear. In fact, by the time of this is rather late in the day. Because this would have come out, late 77. Action kind of had its wings clipped through its various controversies sometime late in autumn of 1976, and it really had to kind of tone it down. After that, it got pulled off the shelves for a bit. I think most prominently for a story it ran a story called Kids Rule OK. Now the way Action operated, it would kind of latch onto a certain 70s pop cultural kind of trait, and it would sort of do its own very graphic preteen take on that. So the kind of yob-lit. I covered the get the name he wrote under now. Is the guy who wrote Confessions of a Window Cleaner. He wrote a yob-lit novel under another name, which I've covered not that long ago. So there was a lot of that in the 70s. So Action kind of latched onto that theme. So there was a certain amount of kind of 70s hooligan type of stuff going on in the stories. Now Kids Rule OK, it was buried by the time of this. It didn't make it into this volume. They sadly didn't revive us, or didn't kind of revisit the story for this volume. You do get the yobby theme in, there's various sports stories. I was never that interested in the sports stories as a rule, but as a kid. But Action had a way of, they'd kind of write this kind of yob stuff into them, so they kind of gave them this voyeuristic. So in this volume's case, the story is Sports Not for Losers, which manages to combine the themes of yobbism with long distance running or hurdling. Sounds a bit unlikely, doesn't it? But you can see here Len there, classic kind of 70s yob. He's got that kind of distressed feather cut, and just out of shot there's bother boots with kind of turned up flares and the leather jacket. He's the unlikely sporting prodigy his brother kind of coerces him into competing. He just wants to loaf around and smoke cigarettes and be a yob. But his brother, I think his brother was an aspiring athlete, but injured his leg. So, you know, by proxy, he's pushing Len somewhat unwillingly into that role. But Len's not making life easy. He's having a bit of a ruck with a teacher there, the jazz teacher, by the look of him. Look at that. He's got that kind of that little Peter Sutcliffe beard going on, and sorry. One of his races turns into a near fight. Yeah. You want to get your ankle busted? Carry on talking, mate. Another of Action Comics' controversial points was that it was one of the, I don't know if it was the first, but it was certainly one of the earliest boys' papers of the time to carry a war story in which the protagonist or the hero was German, and that was kind of unthinkable at the time. I think it might have happened maybe in those little Commando weekly books, might have tried it once or twice, but it kind of really went against the grain of, you know, the rationale behind these stories was a kind of, I suppose Brits feel good about themselves post-war with tales of, you know, rather embellished tales of wartime daring do. Suddenly Action is giving us a German hero, Hellman of the Hammer Force. He's a major in the major of Panzers. He's a tough, ruthless soldier, but he's no Nazi. He fights fair. You know, they kind of got past the, I suppose the rather difficult ideological sticking point there of kind of pitching him as very much anti-Nazi. He has no truck with these dirty SS types who of course show up in every fucking story. So this one's no exception. There's Hellman out there in Tobruk or wherever fighting a clean war, and up pops Sturmenführer someone or other, Eichner, and Eichner is interrogating British prisoners in a most ungentlemanly fashion. You can catch that frame there. There's still, you know, even though this is action toned down, this is quite graphic stuff. There's also in these books there's this kind of in these comics, sometimes in the war stories there's this slightly S&M-ish thing going on. I wonder how many regular readers went on to develop a serious S&M habit in later life. Still, I wouldn't know about that. Anyway, Actions, I suppose its lead story, its crowning glory. You think back to the period it came out, you know, one of the biggest box office hits around that time was a film by an up-and-coming young director concerning a big bastard shark. So Action, of course, get in on this with Hookjaw, which is the story of another dirty great shark. The difference being that this one, as its name implies, not only has it got rows of teeth, it's got this kind of hook sticking out of its lower jaw, which it uses, you know, to skewer divers with when it fancies it. I think this is a kind of remnant of someone trying to catch it with this giant hook and failing, and this thing becomes sort of this extra item in the fish's armoury. I don't know if you can see it there. See it in the frame there. Bloody great hook coming out of it. This story was particularly graphic. I think they've toned it down a bit from the 1976 issues, but it's still, you know, still a bit strong when you consider, you know, this was pitched at the, you know, sort of pre-teens. The other prominent stories through Action's lifeline, there was, you know, Rollerball had also recently been a hit, so you had a kind of this death game that convicts played called Spinball, which usually ended in mutilation and injury and death and so on. There was that. This, I think, that gets the sort of story treatment, you know, sort of a text story treatment with a couple of illustrations rather than the full comic strip treatment in this. Also, with the kind of Dirty Harry kind of thing being fairly current around that time, so we have our own kind of homegrown maverick, does the dirty jobs kind of, I don't know what he's meant to be like, not like a sort of MI5 type. It was like, you imagine like the Professionals, that kind of thing. Dredger, again, he gets this kind of prose story in this with a couple of illustrations, but you know, he gets to throw his weight around. So yeah, quite pleased with that. So yeah, all very kind of 1970s boys' own stuff. Not a bad haul, although obviously you do have to treat most of this stuff with a generous pinch of salt.